It began as an ordinary day at Kensington Palace until a dusty, forgotten drawer was opened. Inside, sealed with wax and addressed in Diana's handwriting, was a letter that hadn't seen daylight in nearly 3 decades. And what it said would unravel everything William thought he knew about his mother and his brother. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William hadn't gone looking for answers that morning. He was doing what heirs often do in quiet moments, reordering fragments of a life lived in public, tidying the remnants left behind by time. The drawer resisted at first, as if it had been waiting, guarding something it wasn't ready to release. When it finally opened, the envelope felt heavier than paper should, weighted by memory, by grief, by the unspoken promise of truth. The handwriting was unmistakable, looping and intimate, dated only weeks before everything ended. And the words on the front, "For William, only open when you need to understand," landed like a challenge. He stood still, heart pounding, torn between the duty to preserve the past and the need to confront it. This wasn't like the letters that had surfaced before, the familiar echoes of a mother's warmth shared with the world. This was private, targeted, and urgent. William's first instinct was restraint, the discipline learned over a lifetime of protocol, but it collided with a deeper pull, the sense that this message had been waiting specifically for this moment, for him to be ready. His thoughts turned immediately to Harry, to the years of distance and misunderstanding, to the ache of a bond stretched thin by time and circumstance. The wax seal felt like a boundary between eras, between what was known and what had been deliberately left unsaid. He wondered who else might have known, who might have chosen silence, and why this letter had been hidden rather than destroyed. As he turned it over in his hands, memories surged, whispered warnings, half-finished conversations, the way his mother's eyes searched rooms as if measuring trust. The realization settled in slowly. Then all at once this letter wasn't a keepsake, it was a key. Whatever Diana had written, it wasn't meant to comfort. It was meant to explain, perhaps even to warn. And in that instant, before the seal was broken, William understood that opening it would change more than his own understanding. It would alter the fragile balance between brothers, between past and future, between the crown and the family it claims to protect. But what was in the letter would shake the very foundation of royal brotherhood. The moment William read the first line, he felt her presence like a whisper through time. Diana's words were loving, but urgent. Her warnings about Harry's destiny and the forces that would come between the brothers were chillingly prophetic. The ink, though faded slightly with age, carried a weight that pierced through decades of silence. Diana wrote of Harry's quiet detachment, the way he seemed adrift even as a boy, and the loneliness she feared would only deepen within the rigid confines of the institution. She confessed to sleepless nights, worrying about the subtle ways in which the system would isolate him, using tradition as a veil for exclusion. She didn't name names, but her tone was unmistakable. There were those within the firm who, she believed, would manipulate Harry's vulnerabilities for their own ends. She warned of external influence, of a storm she believed was already gathering around her youngest son. And then came the most startling part, her plea to William. A mother's instruction not just to love his brother, but to protect him. Not in the ordinary sense, but from the very walls they both called home. Diana's words didn't shy away from what she feared might happen. That Harry would be turned into a symbol for rebellion, a lightning rod for everything the monarchy refused to confront. "One day," she wrote, "the world will see him as I do or destroy him." William read those lines again and again, his hands trembling, heart breaking under the weight of her foresight. She knew. Somehow, she had seen the fractures long before they formed. She had predicted not just the public fallout, but the emotional one. And in that moment, William collapsed under the gravity of it all. Not because he didn't understand his mother's message, but because he did, fully. For the first time in his life, he saw Harry not through the lens of conflict or disappointment, but through Diana's eyes, wounded, vulnerable, and still searching for safety. But instead of bringing clarity, the letter opened a floodgate of questions and revived a storm William thought had passed. If Diana's letter had survived all these years, who knew about it? And why was it hidden? William began to suspect someone close had been keeping secrets, and all signs pointed to a member of the royal household no one expected. The questions started gnawing at him almost immediately. It wasn't just about what was in the letter, it was where he found it. Buried in the back of an antique drawer, inside a piece of furniture that hadn't been moved since Diana's passing. How did a letter marked with such urgency and addressed only to him end up lost for nearly 30 years? He retraced steps, cross-referenced inventory lists, and quietly began speaking to long-time palace staff. What he uncovered sent a chill down his spine. A name surfaced, an aide who had once handled Diana's private correspondences. Now long retired, the aide had remained largely out of the public eye. But whispered rumours suggested he had been instructed to gather and secure any personal writings of Diana's in the days following her death. Some items were archived, others never seen again. More disturbing was a revelation from a former footman who recalled a second letter, allegedly more direct and damning, that never made it to either son. That letter, he claimed, was quietly destroyed under pressure from senior royals. And then came the bombshell. Speculation that the Queen Mother herself had intervened to limit the future impact of Diana's voice. There was always fear about what she left behind, one retired butler confessed. Fear that she had written truths no one wanted spoken. For William, it felt like betrayal layered atop grief. His mother's most intimate thoughts, her final plea, had nearly been erased. If this one letter had survived, what else had been buried, lost, or deliberately silenced? The institution he had defended for years suddenly felt like a stranger cloaked in shadows. And that's when William made a call, one that would light a fuse across the Atlantic. Not a press statement, not a palace memo. A direct phone call, brother to brother, after months of silence. William's voice trembled. "There's something Mum left for us. You need to hear it." But Harry's response wasn't what he expected. The silence on the line said everything. Suspicion, hurt, distance carved from years of mistrust. Harry didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was cold. "Is this some new narrative? Another attempt to rope me back in?" William, holding the letter in his hand, didn't flinch. He read the first few lines aloud, Diana's handwriting, her unmistakable words. And suddenly, Harry was no longer the prince hardened by headlines and exile. He was a son. Just a son hearing his mother's voice again after decades of silence. For a moment, the weight of their feud was suspended. But it didn't vanish. It hovered heavy and unresolved. Harry's breath caught, but he said nothing. Then, "I'll come, but only if we're alone." It would be the first time they'd seen each other without cameras, aides, or royal scripts since the Sussex departure. Meghan, sources said, was deeply wary. She warned Harry of traps, of emotional blackmail, of a family that only called when it suited the story. But something had shifted. Diana's words had cut through the noise. There was no spin in them, only truth. And in that truth, both brothers were vulnerable again. Yet even as they agreed to meet, it wasn't reconciliation they were preparing for. It was confrontation. Because what waited between them was more than shared grief. It was years of silence, resentment, and choices that could no longer be undone. But when the brothers came face to face, it wasn't just grief between them, it was blame. Behind closed doors at a secret royal residence, the meeting that could have healed the monarchy quickly turned explosive. What began in silence erupted into accusations, regrets, and the airing of truths long buried. William stood firm, still holding the letter like a relic of their mother's love. But Harry's stare was unrelenting, wounded, fiery, and full of disbelief. "You chose them over me," Harry hissed, the weight of years condensed into 6 damning words. "Every single time, you chose the crown over your own blood." William's voice cracked as he tried to respond. This wasn't the reunion he imagined. He spoke of duty, of the unbearable pressure to keep the family from falling apart. He said he carried the burden for both of them. But Harry only heard justification. Then came Harry's revelation, one that shifted the entire room's atmosphere. Quietly, Almost casually, he said he knew about another letter, a second message Diana had supposedly written, one he had heard whispers about during the chaos following her death, one that vanished before it could ever be read. Suddenly, the confrontation wasn't just about their broken relationship, it was about who had buried their mother's truth, who had erased her voice. The brothers clashed, one demanding answers, the other clinging to the only piece of Diana left in his hands. The letter, instead of being a bridge, became a weapon. Harsh words spilled out, accusations neither had said before. Grief turned into fury. No resolution, just silence again. Only now, the silence was colder, more final. Yet even in the wake of that painful meeting, the story refused to rest, because the real shock came days later when palace insiders leaked what neither brother expected. As the public reeled from rumors of the first letter, an anonymous source dropped a bombshell. There was a second letter, and this one wasn't meant for William. It was Diana's final message to Harry, and it had been hidden far from royal eyes. The internet exploded when a grainy photo surfaced online. A faded cream envelope, the words, "My darling Harry," scrawled in Diana's familiar handwriting, sent shockwaves through a monarchy already teetering on the edge. Whispers soon turned to full-throated speculation. The letter, reportedly kept by Diana's former spiritual advisor, had never passed through palace hands. Some said it was held in a private trust, locked away for Harry's protection, or perhaps for his liberation. Online forums dissected every rumored sentence. Words like freedom, escape, and truth danced across screens, igniting debate over what Diana might have foreseen. Did she know Harry would one day feel alienated from the family? Had she predicted the split before it ever began? Theories spiraled, but one thing was clear. Harry believed the letter was real, and he wanted it back. Sources close to the Sussexes revealed Harry made a direct request to the individual holding the document. That request, however, was met with silence. Whether out of fear, loyalty, or pressure, the gatekeeper of Diana's final words refused to comply. And when Harry turned to the palace for help, he hit another wall. The firm, true to form, issued no statement, not a denial, not a confirmation, just chilling silence. The refusal to engage only deepened public suspicion. Across social media, outrage erupted. Hashtags like "Number Diana's Truth," "Number Royal Lies," and "Number Let Harry Read" trended across continents. Commentators called it a cover-up. Protesters gathered outside royal estates with placards demanding transparency. For a monarchy already facing unprecedented scrutiny, this was a nightmare scenario. And yet, through the firestorm, one question burned brighter than the rest. As the media pressure reached a boiling point, Charles was forced to act. For weeks, Charles said nothing. Then, at a carefully orchestrated royal engagement, he made a cryptic comment caught on a hot mic. Some truths were never meant for daylight. The war between father and sons had officially begun. The remark, barely audible, triggered a media frenzy. Was it a warning, a confession, or a subtle threat wrapped in royal poise? Within hours, lip readers confirmed the phrase, and headlines around the world exploded. The palace refused to clarify, but behind the gilded doors, panic reigned. Senior advisors scrambled to contain the fallout, furious that Charles had allowed emotion to crack through the polished facade. For a monarch known for restraint, the slip wasn't just uncharacteristic, it was dangerous. Rumors swirled of closed-door crisis meetings focused entirely on Diana's legacy. What to acknowledge, what to bury, and how to stop the avalanche already in motion. Camilla, insiders claimed, was the loudest voice in the room, urging Charles to shut it all down, to cut off the boys before the monarchy drowned in the past. But Charles was trapped. Any denial would make him look complicit. Any admission could torch the very crown he waited a lifetime to wear. Meanwhile, William stood at a crossroads, torn between the father who shaped him and the mother whose memory still haunted him. He understood the consequences of siding with Harry, but also the cost of remaining silent. And as the monarchy hesitated, the public made up its mind. Sympathy surged toward the brothers. Diana's image once again was everywhere, not as a princess, but as a mother trying to protect her sons from a machine too powerful to confront. Hashtags became movements. Protesters lit candles outside Kensington Palace. Media outlets ran endless retrospectives, and Charles, for all his power, began to look smaller, more isolated, more like a man wrestling shadows. And just when the story seemed to hit its peak, another royal player stepped into the spotlight. Until now, she stayed silent. But as the letters made headlines and the monarchy's grip weakened, Meghan dropped her own revelation. In an interview watched by millions, she made a claim about Diana that stunned the world. With the same composure that once sent ripples through the institution, Meghan described a moment that felt almost sacred. She recalled the early days after Archie's birth when the pressure was suffocating, the scrutiny unrelenting, and the support within the palace had all but vanished. In those lonely hours, she claimed, Diana came to her not in memory, but in a dream so vivid it felt more like a visitation. Meghan's voice faltered as she repeated the words, "Protect him. They'll never understand him." To some, it was poetic symbolism. To others, a desperate cry disguised as mysticism. But to millions watching, it felt real. The presence she described was not vague. It was maternal, protective, almost prophetic. And in that single moment, Meghan drew a direct, spiritual line between Diana's legacy and her own maternal instinct. Critics were quick to pounce, accusing her of emotional manipulation, exploiting sentiment for sympathy. But supporters rallied, praising her bravery and intuition. Diana, they argued, had always trusted her heart over tradition. As the clip spread globally, Buckingham Palace broke protocol with a rare, no comment. But silence, once again, screamed louder than words. Social media reignited, news panels debated, and the nation found itself staring into the same storm that had once engulfed Diana, only now through Meghan's eyes. The narrative shifted. Diana was no longer just a ghost of royal tragedy. She became a force transcending life and death, still guiding, still warning. The moment reopened wounds, not just in the royal family, but in the public psyche. It challenged everything the monarchy had tried to contain. Because if Meghan was telling the truth, then Diana never really left, and her influence might be stronger than ever. But beneath the headlines, one final piece of the story was waiting in the shadows, and it would change everything. Locked away in a private safe was something no one expected, an old audio cassette, recorded by Diana just weeks before her death. And in it, she speaks directly to the camera, naming names and warning of what was to come. The audio, reportedly discovered in a sealed envelope marked only with her initials, had been tucked away in the possession of a close family friend who had kept silent for nearly 3 decades. But when the chaos surrounding the letters reached a fever pitch, that silence cracked. The recording was raw, unedited, and chilling in its clarity. Diana, in a steady but weary voice, spoke not just of the pressures she faced, but of her sons. She expressed deep concern for both William and Harry, but there was something about her tone when she spoke of Harry that struck a different chord. "They will try to divide you," she said. "Promise me you won't let them." Her voice lingered on that plea, as if she sensed exactly what was coming. The most shocking part wasn't just the emotion, it was the detail. Diana referenced private conversations, hinted at financial forces working behind the scenes, and even alleged that she suspected her communications were being monitored. "I'm not paranoid," she said. "I've simply seen too much." She spoke of a shadow network, one that operated behind the veil of tradition and protocol, a system that didn't just control perception, but controlled people. And in that final haunting message, she named those she believed were responsible for sowing division between her sons. One of them had been close to Charles. Another, shockingly, was from inside her own circle. The authenticity of the tape was confirmed by the very friend who released it. They claimed it was Diana's insurance, a last attempt to guide the future if she couldn't be there. And now, years later, it had surfaced when the royal family was most vulnerable. Why now? That's the question tearing through the halls of power. Was it revenge? Justice? Or a desperate cry to rewrite the story before it was sealed in history? The audio's impact was immediate. Public trust in the monarchy plummeted, while voices demanding transparency grew louder than ever. It wasn't just about Diana anymore, it was about the future of the institution she had once tried to change from within. And as the world holds its breath, one question remains. Can the truth bring healing, or has it already done too much damage? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.